It's something we all feel, isn't it? That invisible thread connecting us to the past, the shared customs and beliefs that shape our communities. It makes you wonder, how do these traditions and cultures really work? What are they made of?
That's the fascinating core of what we're exploring today. We're taking a deep dive into the concepts of tradition and culture, looking at what they truly encompass, why they hold such power, and the forces that are constantly influencing them.
Exactly. For you joining us, our goal is to extract the most crucial insights from the material we've gathered. We want to understand what tradition and culture are, why they're so essential to societies, and the various pressures they face from, the impact of travel and tourism to the ever-evolving landscape of technology.
Hmm.
Our sources offer a range of perspectives, and we're here to guide you through it all in a way that's both informative and hopefully engaging. Okay, so to start, let's really try to nail down what we mean by tradition and culture.
Okay. Our sources provide some helpful starting points. We see the term custom exemplified by the practice of women marrying quite young, say 15, in certain mountainous regions of very specific practice tied to a particular place.
Right.
Then we have tradition, illustrated by something maybe more widespread, like setting off fireworks on New Year's Eve. These examples give us a tangible sense of the different scales, you know?
Right. So a custom feels very localized, almost like a specific habit within a smaller group, whereas a tradition has broader recognition, maybe practiced by a larger community.
Precisely. And then we encounter other related terms like local culture, just the unique flavor of life in a place, cultural diversity, the richness that comes from having many different cultures side by side,
Yeah.
cultural identity, that deep-seated feeling of belonging we get, cultural heritage, which connects us to our ancestors' stories and practices, and cultural value, those sort of fundamental principles.
The bedrock ideas.
Exactly. And we even see cultural assimilation, which describes how one culture might adopt elements of another, which could, potentially lead to changes in its own
It's
traditions.
like a whole web of interconnected ideas, isn't it? Each influencing the others.
It really is. And to take a wider view, the Oxford Dictionary defines culture as the quality of enlightenment and refinement arising from an acquaintance with and concern for what is regarded as excellent in arts, letters, manners, and also, importantly, the sum total of the ways of living built up by a group of human beings and transmitted from one generation to another.
Okay.
What's interesting there is the implication of being cultured or maybe uncultured, suggesting societies often place, well, value judgments on different cultural expressions.
That adds a layer of complexity, doesn't it? It's not just about the practices themselves, but also how they're seen, how they're valued, both inside and outside the group.
Exactly. But I think it's probably fair to say that for most of us, our most immediate connection to culture comes through these traditions and customs, the things we actually do regularly.
Okay, so we're starting to get a clearer picture of what tradition and culture are. But why are they so important? What role do they play, in our lives and in society?
Well, our sources are quite emphatic on this point. Culture is described as a main pillar of development and sustenance of communities, with the pretty firm statement that no society can progress in its absence.
Wow, that's strong.
It is. It's seen as the very identity where common values, attitudes, preferences, knowledge are attributed to the behavior in a particular social group, and it has a demonstrably positive influence on how societies develop.
So it's not just looking backward, it's actively shaping the present and, well, the future too.
Absolutely. And if we zero in on traditions specifically, we see how they often instill fundamental values. Practices passed down can reinforce things like personal responsibility and work ethics, forming what's described as the foundation of family and society.
Hmm.
The idea is that by participating in these traditions, individuals, especially young people, might develop a stronger sense of self-discipline, maybe responsibility.
That makes sense. You can see how consistently doing shared things could foster a sense of duty, maybe collective purpose.
Precisely. Furthermore, sticking to traditions is seen as a vital way to preserve spiritual values and maintain a sense of cultural identity, kind of preventing that feeling of detachment from your roots.
Yeah.
And crucially, keeping traditions alive is essential for teaching future generations about the past, providing that sense of security and continuity. This often includes religious traditions, which can offer a framework for understanding the world.
It's like an inheritance, but maybe not monetary, maybe even more valuable, a legacy of shared understanding.
Exactly. And on a more personal level, traditions and rituals provide a really profound sense of belonging and meaning. Think about family traditions around holidays. They nurture connection, offer comfort, act as familiar anchors in our, fast-paced lives.
Definitely.
For children, especially, these consistent rituals can create a strong sense of connection to their family, their history, offering stability.
It's those shared stories and repeated actions that really build the bonds and a sense of who we are.
Absolutely. Now, here's where things get really interesting when we look at how outside forces interact with these traditions and cultures. Let's take tourism, for example.
Mhm.
Our sources highlight a real push and pull here.
Yes, it sounds like a classic double-edged sword. On one side, there's the worry that using traditions to attract tourists can cheapen them, maybe even destroy them, turning authentic practices into shows for profit.
Right.
But then there's the other side, the argument that tourism might be the only way some traditions survive, by providing, financial support.
That's a central tension. On the positive side, tourism can inject vital money into preserving heritage sites, supporting local culture, arts, crafts, traditions. It also opens doors for cultural exchange, learning, maybe leading to broader appreciation.
You could imagine a community where a specific craft was dying out, and tourism creates a market, an incentive to keep it going.
Exactly. However, the potential negative impacts are, well, significant. There's a real risk of traditions being changed or commodified just to meet tourist expectations.
Losing their original meaning.
Yes, leading to a loss of cultural value and identity. Authenticity can be sacrificed. And we also have to think about potential damage to traditional sites from maybe irresponsible tourist behavior or just overcrowding.
So it's this constant balancing act between the economic pluses and the need to protect cultural integrity.
Precisely. And a similar dynamic pops up when we look at the relationship between tradition, culture, and technology. The question raised is whether traditional cultures are inevitably lost as technology advances. Some suggest there's an inherent conflict.
It feels like another one of those big questions of our time. Tech is so embedded in our lives, it's hard to imagine it not affecting something as fundamental as culture.
Well, on one hand, technology offers some pretty amazing possibilities for preservation and sharing. It can vastly expand our knowledge of cultural diversity, raise awareness globally about preservation needs,
Right.
and even promote traditional values to a much wider audience through digital platforms. Think of online archives of music, stories, virtual tours. Technology can be a powerful tool.
Absolutely. You can see how a remote community might use the internet to share their unique traditions, keeping them alive in a totally new way.
True. However, our sources also flag the negative impacts. Industrialization and modernization, often driven by tech progress, can lead to big population shifts. People move from rural areas to cities for jobs.
Mm-hmm.
This can mean abandoning traditional ways of life and losing crucial skills. The examples given were things like embroidery or pottery maybe not being passed down in urban settings.
It's the move away from the traditional context that causes the break.
Precisely. And then there's the broader thing of globalization, which technology obviously fuels. This can lead to cultural assimilation, where developing countries might adopt norms and values from more dominant nations as they integrate globally.
Yeah.
Our sources touch on how global media can subtly shape values, sometimes overshadowing local culture.
So it's not just losing specific skills, but potentially a blending or even dominance of certain cultures globally.
Exactly. And this leads us right into the issue of culture loss itself. Why does it happen? Our sources point to several key reasons. One is simply a lack of active preservation efforts. If traditions aren't intentionally kept up, they can just fade away.
It takes conscious effort, doesn't it? It won't just happen automatically.
Absolutely. Another crucial reason mentioned is parents maybe not actively emphasizing cultural practices with their kids. If the younger generation isn't consistently involved at home, the transmission chain gets weaker.
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, if schools neglect or downplay cultural studies, that also contributes to a lack of awareness among young people.
It sounds like a challenge on multiple fronts: family, education, the wider community.
Indeed. Government inaction or a lack of supportive policies for cultural preservation is also identified as a factor.
Yeah.
And as we talked about with tech, rapid globalization plays a big part. The influence of, say, Western civilization on behaviors and thinking elsewhere is a prime example.
You really see that influence everywhere, don't you? Global brands, media, they have such reach, especially with younger generations, sometimes pushing aside local traditions.
Exactly. However, the sources do offer some potential ways forward. Individuals taking a proactive role, practicing their traditions, sharing them.
Making it part of daily life.
Yes. Educational institutions, both schools and parents educating the young about the value of their heritage, and governments playing a role through campaigns, raising awareness about the seriousness of culture loss, emphasizing why preservation matters.
So it really is a collective effort needed. Individual, family, school, government all have a part to play.
Precisely. Now, another really compelling angle is the dynamic between tradition and individual freedom, particularly for young people. Should they follow established traditions or have the freedom to act as individuals, even if it means breaking from tradition?
This feels like a core tension in many societies, that push and pull between respecting the past and embracing individual expression, maybe progress.
Absolutely. The arguments for following traditions often stress that they reinforce key values: responsibility, work ethic, seen as vital for a stable society. Internalizing these values through tradition is thought to build self-discipline.
Right.
And as we mentioned, it helps preserve spiritual values and maintain cultural identity.
It's about upholding the social fabric, the shared morality passed down.
Exactly. But the counter-arguments for individual freedom point out that some traditions are, frankly, outdated. They might not fit anymore. The example given of women marrying at 15.
Yeah, that's a stark one.
It really highlights how a tradition can limit potential, especially by today's standards. It brings that potential conflict between tradition and individual rights right into focus. Makes you think how societies deal with traditions that might seem harmful now.
It shows how traditions, while often valuable, aren't necessarily set in stone and can sometimes clash with evolving norms and rights.
Precisely. There needs to be room for reflection, maybe adaptation. Now, shifting focus again to a broader view, our sources also have some powerful insights on culture's role in national development, using Rwanda as a really interesting example.
So this is where culture isn't just about looking back, but is seen as an active force driving progress.
Exactly. Culture is described here as a powerful driver for development with real social, economic, and environmental impacts. It shapes lifestyles, behavior, consumption, even values about the environment. The key point is that development efforts can't ignore the cultural context. Interventions that are sensitive to the local culture, that take a human-centered approach, are just much more likely to be effective, sustainable, inclusive.
So a sort of one-size-fits-all development plan will likely miss the mark if it doesn't account for the underlying culture.
Absolutely. The article digs into specific contributions. Economically, culture can help create green jobs, reduce poverty. Environmentally, it's key for sustainable cities, access to resources like water, conserving nature, strengthening community resilience.
It's amazing to see those tangible links between cultural values and things like economic growth or environmental health.
Indeed. And politically, culture is just as vital. A free cultural sector fosters things like human rights, free expression, diversity, open debate. It strengthens unity in crises, shapes national identity, and is fundamental for peace building.
Wow.
It even lays a foundation for political rights, linking historical governance with modern democracy.
So culture isn't just arts and crafts. It's deeply woven into the foundations of a healthy, progressing society.
Exactly. And the Rwanda example shows this powerfully. Their core cultural values, kindness, hard work, unity, shared purpose, along with their arts and traditions, are credited with really driving their development efforts. These cultural attributes are seen as pillars of their solidarity and progress. The article also notes traditional celebrations offer great chances for intercultural exchange.
It's a potent reminder of how deeply held cultural values can really shape a nation's path and its resilience.
Absolutely. And just to bring it back to the individual level again, our sources reiterate why keeping traditions alive matters so much. It's not just about preserving history. It's about giving the next generation an understanding of their past, fostering connection to family and place, and offering that vital sense of security and continuity.
Right.
Traditions, especially family rituals, build bonds, offer comfort, instill that deep sense of belonging and meaning in, let's face it, an increasingly complex world. They help children feel anchored.
It all connects, doesn't it?
Yeah.
From those very personal family connections right up to the broader societal, even national impact of culture and tradition.
It really does. Tradition and culture are truly complex, multifaceted things. They shape our identities, individually and collectively, play this critical role in development, and are constantly under pressure from various forces. We've explored those tensions: preservation versus progress, tradition versus individual freedom.
So, for you, our listener, as you think about these powerful forces of globalization technology, what specific traditions in your own life, or maybe your community, feel most important to you, most crucial to safeguard? And perhaps the harder question, what are the best ways to ensure they continue for future generations? It's something to mull over, that balance between honoring our heritage and navigating the future within our own cultural context.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, understanding and engaging with our traditions and cultures isn't just passive preservation. It's an ongoing, dynamic process of discovery, of connection, a journey that continuously shapes who we are and the societies we're trying to build.